And I'm Bill Anderson. So today and every day, we're going to get you caught up on things that are going on throughout our area, take live looks with our different reporters as they update you on things that we've been following throughout the morning, some of the things that perhaps you heard discussed this morning on Good Day, some of the breaking news that's going on after Good Day goes off. It is our goal to continue to keep you informed on everything that's taking place. And we, of course, want you to participate and spread the word that you can get all of your information here every day at 10 o'clock. So there are several things that we're going to follow this morning, several things that we're going to check in on. We've got a meeting coming up very shortly in Washington, D.C. that we will tell you about. Of course, there is the funeral of a firefighter who lost his life in the line of duty that we will go live to throughout this morning and keep you informed. There are several different updates with the young soccer players in Thailand who have now all been rescued along with their coach but are in the hospital. So we will update you on that and some of the effects, and also things a little bit closer to home that are taking place here. Not a surprise to anybody as we keep you informed about the weather that's been going on here, people taking their trips down to the shore. Normally a great time, but also there are some risks involved when you go. One of those risks is the rip tide and the rip current. Kathy, Scott, Sue keep you constantly informed about the things that are taking place there. Hurricane Chris, of course, is making his way through the area. Not here right now, but you do begin to feel some of the impacts as it moves. And so how is that impacting us? How is that impacting the current down at the Jersey Shore? What precautions should you take? Our own Steve Keeley is there and giving you an update on just what to do.
The Atlantic City Beach Patrol headquarters here tells us they are busier than ever this summer, especially over last summer. How about triple the number of rescues already this year over last? July temperatures right now where they usually are in July, closer above 90. Combine that with that hurricane hundreds of miles out in the Atlantic, and it's a deadly combination, putting lots of people in the ocean, pushing rough waves to the shoreline, and the pulling out effect of riptides that often puts people in panic mode. They try to swim in while they get pulled out, then get pulled under as they lose their strength, their breath, and their ability to stay afloat. Mike Nigro, a swimmer here in Atlantic City, told us it happened to him.
A number of different factors, especially the heat, yes, the number one factor. The sand pump from last year, the residuals from that, the sand's moving around a lot more. Some days we've had a lot of beach, some days we have no beach. The riptides have been moderate so far, but we've had some big flare-up days at the change of tides. A lot of gullies, if you know what they are. We have a lot of gullies down beach. We've had a lot of little kid rescues. We're way above our number for last year at this point, about triple what we had at this time last year.
I was swimming towards the shore, and I'm a good swimmer, and I wasn't getting anywhere, and I started to lose my breath a little bit, and I was getting a little panicky. So I caught my breath, and I kind of went sideways a little bit, and I got a little bit more forward, and then I just kept doing that till I worked my way all the way in.
It's just the time of the year. I think it hits quite a bit this time of the year, July, end of July. People don't just heed the warnings and whatnot, and the lifeguards aren't out there.
You see a lot of people swimming before and after the lifeguards?
I do. I'm up on the boardwalk by the T-jetty out there by Ocean Resorts Casino, and there's quite a few people to jump in there, and it's just it's so dangerous. I mean, I know it's tempting, but it's rough right along against those rocks and whatnot, and what we're doing is jeopardizing the first responders too. I mean, it's a big risk they're taking, not just for themselves and their families.
The Beach Patrol here in Atlantic City is extending its hours, especially at popular beaches, because despite all the warnings like ours right now about not swimming when there's no lifeguards on duty, people continue to go into the ocean, especially after dinner, while it's still light out, still hot out, but the lifeguards are still not out. Back to you.
And thanks so much, Steve. And that actually is the key. We hear it all the time, unfortunately, around this time of year. There are some really basic rules that you always hear. One, make sure, as they pointed out, only swim when lifeguards are on duty. And two, if something happens, and you saw the gentleman who admittedly was a strong swimmer, but he got caught in one of the rip currents, and it was hard for him. A strong swimmer can't swim against it. So again, follow those rules, follow those basics, swim along with the shore, and eventually you will make your way back into the shore. And third, of course, is, as hard as it is in those circumstances, try not to panic, because all that does is take your energy quicker. So thank you, Steve. We will check in with you a little bit later, also keeping you informed about all of the movement of that storm as it makes its way, if it makes its way to our area. You, of course, can always get updates on fox29.com, the Weather Authority, with Sue Serio, Scott Williams, Kathy Orr, Mike Masco, and the entire team. One of the other stories that we've been following this morning was a tragedy that struck close to home in North Philadelphia. A fire has now left a family trying to rebuild, trying to put the pieces back together. And our own Lauren Johnson is there with an update.
Hey there. So one of the things that we do know this morning is that one of the victims of this unfortunate tragedy happens to be 33-year-old Stephen Timoni. Family and friends have confirmed that information for us. They're still gathered here outside this home in North Philadelphia where this happened, and family and friends are starting to create a little memorial here outside of the home. So let me give you the details of what we do know. We understand that Stephen was at the home with friends hanging out when a fire started overnight at this home on 9th Street in North Philadelphia. According to family members, his body was found at the bottom of the steps. The young woman's was at the top of the steps, maybe indicating that they were trying to escape the fire, but it just became too much. Now, the other person who lives in this home, actually, because Stephen was visiting the home, was actually not home at the time because he was talking to police about an incident that happened earlier in the day. He says that he was assaulted and he was robbed, and when he was with police, he got a phone call about the fire, came back and found the home on fire. So a lot of people speculating about maybe the fire being set intentionally. Maybe it was an act of retaliation from the assault earlier. Right now, authorities have not confirmed that for us, but that is the rumor mill happening here on the street among people who have been involved in this entire situation. We did have a moment to speak with Stephen's father earlier.
I saw him last night on the step talking with his friends, having a good time. I was getting ready for work. And he said, "Dad, am I making too much noise?" I said, "No, you all right, go ahead." And I went on and laid it down, and not thinking, I sit there and say to myself, as I could have avoided it, but never thought something like this would happen. We have to stick together as family. We have to support our family and stay strong. That's what we have to do. He was a family man. He had good values, and that's what he wanted to do. We have to stay strong.
And I just spoke to his best friend moments ago, and it seems that that's what everyone is going to remember about Steve, is that he was a family man who was a very happy person. They say he would give you the shirt off of his back and would do anything to help anyone. So investigators now trying to figure out exactly what happened here with this fire, how it started, was it set intentionally, and they have some answers to get to. In the meantime, two families, of course, devastated by the news of what happened here.
And thank you so much, Lauren. And of course, we will keep you informed on that story and others throughout the morning. We're in the Technical Operations Center here at Fox 29 News Now, getting you updated after Good Day goes off with all of the news that's going on throughout the day. And you can always find us here at 10 o'clock in the morning, keeping you informed, and always stay updated at fox29.com. Now, a story that so many people have been following over the last several weeks were soccer players in Thailand who were stranded in a cave. Everybody was looking at the plan to try and get them rescued, and the individuals who went in, many risking their lives, one ultimately losing their life in that rescue. But one of the things now, as thankfully all of the young soccer players as well as their coach have been rescued, one of the things that people are not as informed about is the lasting impact. What ultimately happens after you're rescued, when everyone is celebrating the fact that you're safe? Is there a lasting emotional impact? Is there PTSD? Are there things that these young people are going to have to deal with for an extended period of time as they are thankful that they're alive, but still dealing with the trauma that they face? That topic was discussed this morning on Good Day, and let's take a look.
I've been happy to say that they made it out alive. We're talking about the Thai soccer team, 12 kids and their coach. They are now recovering in the hospital after being safely rescued from that flooded cave.
So we got, 8 of the boys were rescued by a team of Thai and international divers on Sunday and Monday. Then rescuers brought out the remaining 4 boys and the coach yesterday. The team got trapped in the cave, as you know by now, when they were exploring it and became, trapped when the cave flooded because of the monsoon rains. Thai officials say 2 of the boys possibly have lung infections. They're all still in the hospital, but everyone is in good spirits. So, we have a psychologist here who's going to help us evaluate the condition of these young men and the coach. Frank Farley, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Doctor, I should say. So, what do you think will be the emotional consequence of this 18-day ordeal?
I think it'll be actually positive on average. That is, I don't foresee a lot of PTSD, the famous PTSD diagnosis.
Yeah.
Consider what these kids have gone through. They have survived an incredible experience and lived to tell their story. They have mingled with the creme de la creme of Thai military, the SEALs.
The Prime Minister met them.
Well, I mean, this is incredible stuff. This is like a great badge of courage and accomplishment that they can carry with them.
They're probably euphoric now. You know their parents are, and they are too. But you say they could be famous the rest of their lives.
Oh, absolutely. And there's going to be movies made, and there's going to be interviews, there's going to be books. These kids are, got a whole life going forward. And so therefore, and also given their age, the age range of these kids is an age in which you have a lot of risk tolerance, adventuresomeness.
Resilience.
Resilience is a big factor.
Yeah.
And so I would predict that you're not going to see a lot of PTSD among the boys. There's another phenomenon we call post-traumatic growth. That is, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Yeah, there's songs written about it.
Yeah, they'll certainly be strong after this. But what about the coach, who's older than them, 25? Do you think it'll be different for him then?
I think it'll be a little bit different from him. Now, he's a Buddhist monk, basically.
That's right.
And he seems to have had an important role for them during those 18 days, particularly the first 9 or 10 days
Calming
before
them
other
down.
adults. He took them through meditation, etc. And so I think that was very positive. He will be questioned, of course, as to why he ever led them in, during the monsoon season into a deep cave.
How about the moms and dads? 18 days of stress.
They're the ones I worry about for PTSD. And are they going to be handling this thing? They might have thought, oh my gosh, our son is going to die down there. And so they're going to have, I think, more likely PTSD than the boys.
How did they survive?
Well, my feeling is that they substituted thrill for threat. Instead of seeing this as a threat and so on, they saw it as a thrill, an adventure to be lived. And they probably were optimistic that they'll get out, and it was 9 to 10 days. They were a team. They'd done things before.
Right.
So there's going to be group cohesion.
Did that help being team members?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sure. And they all knew each other. They're interdependent. And they're certainly not going to encourage anyone to hit the floor and start crying for mommy.
Right.
So, to use the old phrase, man up.
Yeah,
is probably one of the factors going on with these 12
Seems like they
boys.
could accomplish anything now.
Right.
After going through this.
And they don't need
course.
any more team building. I feel like they
No.
probably are
No.
very close.
Their whole life is redefined.
Doctor, good to see you.
Good to
Thank
see
you so much.
All right. Well,
Thank you so much, guys. It is 10:15, Fox 29 News Now, live in the Technical Operations Center. We will do this every day, keeping you informed on things that are going on locally, but also nationally. And one of those things that's taking place right now. Earlier this year, Education Secretary Betsy DeVos put together a commission to study school safety, study ways to try to keep young people in schools as safe as possible, brought a group of experts together to explore the best way to do that. They actually are in a meeting right now in Washington, D.C. We're going to take a look in on it.
Situations involving families of people with serious mental illnesses. In December 2017, HHS issued this guidance along with a new set of frequently asked questions and other materials specifically addressing HIPAA's application to mental health treatment information. These resources from HHS would go a long way to clarifying for providers as well as for individuals and their families and schools what HIPAA actually does and does not permit. They are available online, but they have not received much attention or promotion. Much more could be done to ensure that these resources are widely distributed and are used in connections with trainings and other education. We would all benefit from measures to ensure that people understand their rights and providers understand their obligations so that HIPAA can be implemented in a way that both protects safety and the important privacy interests that are pivotal to good and effective mental health care. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Ms. Mathis. The Commission clearly is going to have to consider the interplay of your testimony with the recommendations of Dr. Kataoka around school-based mental health services and how the unique circumstances that are presented there. Our second HIPAA speaker is Ms. Doris Fuller. Ms. Fuller is a mental illness researcher, advocate, and family member who's going to share her experiences regarding confidentiality in the mental health context. Thank you, Ms. Fuller.
Thank you, members of the Commission. It is a privilege to be here today as a mental health advocate and family member who has observed HIPAA's role in mental health care delivery in a number of settings, including on campuses. A few years ago, I was asked to talk about mental illness and violence to the leading organization for student affairs officers on colleges and universities. Mental illness nearly always emerges by the age of 24 in late adolescence or young adulthood, so these school officials are working on the front lines of mental health. In fact, because of the age that serious psychiatric disease typically starts, it is likely that no single other institutional setting in America serves so many individuals with mental health conditions as our high schools and colleges. During my talk, I extolled the phenomenal communication support and encouragement my daughter, Natalie, and I received from state university officials and healthcare providers when she had her first psychotic break as a college senior. Her symptoms led to a number of extreme behaviors, including painting her naked body blue and pressing her body print on the walls of the campus art building. She was not a typical or easy student to serve. Yet, in significant part, because of the university and its health centers' active collaboration with me in getting Natalie safely through these episodes, she ultimately returned to campus and graduated, unlike the unfortunate story that you told. At the end of my talk to the group, I asked if anyone from the university was in the room. 2 hands rose timidly in the back, and I said, "Thank you. My daughter would not have succeeded without you." After I finished, they came up front to talk to me. By this time, I was working at the Treatment Advocacy Center and regularly hearing from families in crisis because of mental illness in their young adult children. I had learned that few students and families experience the open, collaborative approach Natalie and I did. Why was that? I asked the officers. How could you talk to me and work with me as a family member when other schools around the country won't even return parents' calls? They told me it was a matter of institutional policy and practice. The university was guided by the conviction that it had the authority under HIPAA, FERPA, and applicable state laws to act in the best interests of its students, even if their actions required disclosing personal health information or other confidential matters to families. It was their belief that acting in the best interest of their students was their business. I heard a similar description of privacy considerations when I attended a 2013 hearing of the House Subcommittee on Oversight and Investigation. The committee was taking testimony into whether HIPAA helps or hinders patient care and public safety. In his written and oral testimony, the director of the Office of Civil Rights for HHS emphasized that the HIPAA privacy rule allows communications between healthcare providers and patient family and friends. Even so, he acknowledged, historically, providers have been reluctant to share information with patients' friends and family members. Family members would tell you provider reluctance is a gross understatement. Stonewalling comes closer to what many experience. I myself have stood in the emergency room of a hospital, not 15 minutes from this room, with my daughter bleeding and hallucinating, on a gurney beside me, and been told that federal law prohibited hospital personnel from informing or involving me in her care. This was false. As my colleague has already described, HIPAA is itself flexible and accommodating, and the federal government has made a significant effort to get that message across to medical providers. Since that 2013 House subcommittee hearing, multiple government offices have issued unambiguous guidance that should by now have ended the stonewalling. HHS distributes extremely user-friendly fact sheets for providers and caregivers through its website. Words like the health provider can share information in the patient's best interests are repeated over and again. The 21st Century Cures Act took these efforts a step further by establishing statutory requirements for model training for healthcare providers to assure they know what is permissible under existing rules. To date, however, these requirements have not been funded and they have not been implemented. It bears repeating that while medical providers, schools, and a host of others routinely claim they withhold information or bar family members from treatment deliberations to avoid legal liability, to my knowledge, there has been no case ever of an individual provider being sued for a HIPAA violation. And in fact, there is no statutory provision in HIPAA for such legal action. It also bears repeating that the mental health treatment narrative for young children in general has moved emphatically to the position that family members play a critical role in recovery. Family engagement is a cornerstone of the coordinated care model developed by the National Institute of Mental Health for responding to first episode psychosis. Child and adolescent mental health care has become firmly anchored in a model of leaving children with serious emotional disorders or mental illness in their natural settings, home and school, whenever possible, and engaging all the players around them, including family, in their mental health development. We are here today because of concerns about school safety and the impact of mental health on it. It cannot be repeated often enough that most violent acts are not committed by people with mental illness, and most people with mental illness are not violent. We could eliminate all the murders associated with mental illness in this country, and 96% of the nation's murders would still occur. But statistically, the risk of violence is higher in people with psychiatric disorders that distort reality and impair daily function. That risk is highest early after mental illness symptoms begin, precisely when individuals are most likely to be in high school or on college campuses. It is in the best interest of all to intervene early and effectively in these diseases. To this end, nobody knows more about the health histories, risk factors, triggers, and other characteristics of teenagers and young adults than their family members and caregivers who live with them and have known them all their lives. Family members possess unique insights into their loved ones facing mental health challenges, and they are uniquely positioned and supremely motivated to overcome those challenges. When we talk about mental health and safety of our school children, we should be mindful that the most likely victim of mental health tragedy is the child, him or herself. In 2016 and 17 combined, 5 children died in 7 mass assaults in America's schools, and 17 more were wounded. It has been worse this year. In the same year, we lost 2,117 teenagers between 15 and 19 to suicide, and 3,606 young adults aged 20 to 24. 5,723 high school and college-aged young people combined. Despite the productive collaboration I experienced with my daughter's school and the vast majority of her healthcare providers, I ultimately lost my Natalie to suicide. One of the things I did to cope with my grief was to participate in a family support group of the National Foundation for Suicide Prevention. As heartbroken as I was and remain
over 29 in the Technical Operations Center, we were taking a look in on a safety hearing convened by Education Secretary Betsy DeVos. But there's currently also in Washington, D.C., well, actually, there's a meeting taking place in NATO summit. President Trump is there, and there have been some fireworks back and forth as they discuss the ongoing negotiations as it relates to NATO. President Trump, Germany Chancellor Angela Merkel, and others are there. Let's take a look.
Can you talk to the state press? Thank you, press. Thank you. Thank you, press.
Let's go. Make your way out.
Thank you. We did discuss that. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, press. Thank you. Thank you, press. Come on, guys.
And we will check back in updates on that. But what has been taking place there, a lot of back and forth about the United States' role in NATO, about others and the funding, and ultimately how they will address that going forward. We caught the tail end of it, but we will check back in and get more information on that. Let's go back to the school safety meeting and check in there again.
Thinking we don't shut family out of the ER when their loved ones have a medical crisis or are injured in car accidents. Federal law and clinical practice recognize the family's vital role in mental health care. Anything less than universal embrace should be unacceptable. Our school children are our future. For their sake and ours, the HIPAA training mandates of the 21st Century Cures Act need to be funded and fulfilled so that inclusion, not exclusion, of families is the default.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Fuller, and thank you for sharing your personal story as well as, I think, the important cautions you raised, not just about the importance of our right to privacy, but our right to information as family members. Very important. Our final two speakers are going to be discussing FERPA. Our first speaker is Ms. Sonia Traynor, the Managing Director for Legal Advocacy at the National School Boards Association. So, Ms. Traynor, thank you very much.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for inviting the National School Boards Association to offer comments on public schools' interaction with the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, FERPA, in the important context of school safety. NSBA, through its members' state school boards associations, represents the nation's 95,000 board members and 50 million public school students. NSBA is fortunate to count among its programs the NSBA Council of School Attorneys, which is the professional network of 3,000 plus attorneys who represent public school boards. The council informs the work of local school board attorneys as they come together with their school boards and district staff to maintain safe and supportive environments where students can learn and thrive. In pursuing this goal, schools call on their attorneys to help them comply with legal requirements on nearly every aspect of their mission: bidding, employment and labor, special education, equity, equal access. The list goes on. But perhaps more than any other federal law, FERPA pervades nearly every step school staff take in their daily interactions with students, families, and the community. NSBA is pleased to appear before you today to share our insight on how this law can inform matters of school safety as school boards work toward preventing tragic acts of mass violence such as school shootings. For over 40 years, FERPA has provided a federal framework for schools to safeguard student education records and personally identifiable information contained in them. The law requires schools to give parents and students access to their records and prohibits the release of records without parental consent, with various enumerated exceptions. Since FERPA's passage in 1974, the statute and implementing regulations have changed to address the concerns of the times. In 2008, amendments allowed contractors access to records when they are acting as school officials. After the devastating Virginia Tech shooting, schools were given clear deference under a rational basis standard when applying the health and safety exception, allowing release without consent. The Department of Education, through its Family Policy Compliance Office and Privacy Technical Assistance Center, has provided timely and helpful guidance for schools as technology and safety needs have evolved. The amendments and resulting guidance aim to allow schools to fulfill their mission to keep students and staff safe and to facilitate learning while still safeguarding student privacy. Currently, schools work with law enforcement and at the state and local level, and social service organizations to the extent permitted by law, often through memoranda of understanding, outlining guidelines for sharing information about students who cross agencies. As schools address increasingly heightened awareness of risks and threats to school safety, there have been some situations that show the limitations of the current FERPA framework. We will present 2 examples today, which are explained in more detail in our submitted statement. First, the brewing incident scenario. School staff are alerted to activity on social media about 2 students taunting each other over the course of the school year. No time, place, or manner of violence is specifically threatened, and there is no threat of imminent physical harm yet. But the banter is escalating to the point where school staff believe the students are a post or 2 away from things boiling over into violence at school. School personnel have information in some education records, for example, an on-campus fight that occurred recently between the 2 students that resulted in discipline, or an exchange of words in the hallway that was noted as an infraction, that might help local law enforcement intercede and head off the violence directed at the school. Under FERPA, school personnel would need parent or student consent if the student is 18 to release education records or personally identifiable information, or the situation would have to fall under an exception. Although many schools will and should seek parent involvement and consent in this scenario, that participation is not always forthcoming or possible, especially if time is of the essence. Each FERPA exception that might apply has a limitation, including the health and safety exception, which requires an articulable and significant threat to the health or safety of a student or other individual. When the perceived threat of violence is arguably imminent, many attorneys will advise their school clients that the risk of a FERPA violation is low and recommend that they report information necessary to keep the school community safe. But a rational and cautious approach would be not to report information in education records so as not to violate FERPA. A second real-world example shows a FERPA barrier in reverse. A high school student with significant special needs and school-based services makes the statement, quote, "It would be easy to bring a gun to this school." This student is well known by the administration, staff, and students as a person who presents no danger, even considering the statement. The administration does not, therefore, report the statement to law enforcement. A fellow student goes home and tells his parents what the student said. Social media explodes, and law enforcement shows up at school the next day with no subpoena or court order, but seeking information from the school. In this scenario, school personnel are unsure what information they may share with a police officer, as they do not believe there is any danger. Therefore, the health and safety emergency exception, by its own terms, does not apply. Information in the student's education record would provide insight about the student's needs and typical behaviors, including perhaps database assessments indicating the student's propensity for inappropriate outbursts, but no propensity for violence. A cautious school attorney will advise against disclosure in this example without parental consent to avoid a FERPA violation. But if parental consent is not obtainable, a narrow exception allowing school personnel to share information necessary for local officials to assess a threat accurately could diffuse unnecessary panic in a very limited set of circumstances and prevent needless law enforcement action against a student. School officials should be granted limited and narrow discretion to disclose information contained in a student's education record when, in the exercise of their professional discretion, the school personnel find disclosure is necessary to protect students or staff from reasonably foreseeable risk of physical harm, such as a mass shooting, or when there is a concern that the student may be considered a threat absent knowledge of his background that would indicate otherwise. A FERPA change could also expressly allow states, local governments, and community service agencies to enter memoranda of understanding, permitting certain narrowly defined standards for sharing information. In addition to or in lieu of such a regulatory change, technical assistance in the form of guidance with specific examples from the Department of Education would assist schools. Such changes to FERPA would require policymakers to consider long-standing jurisprudence establishing limits on First Amendment free speech rights. Similarly, because confidentiality is a cornerstone of mental health treatment in this country, care should be taken to avoid broad new rules that discourage access to treatment for mental, behavioral, or emotional issues. Rather, the goal should be to craft narrowly defined exceptions that permit referral to mental health services and to law enforcement when physical harm or violence, such as a school shooting, is reasonably foreseeable. Any change to FERPA and its regulation allowing additional discretion to school officials should come with clear safeguards for family and student privacy and clear limits on school authority. The goal behind any change would be to remove a barrier to collaboration between schools and community services, including law enforcement, that would prevent a particular act of violence, such as a shooting at school. Parental participation in the process and consent for disclosure of education records should remain the first and preferred approach when a student is perceived to present a threat. NSBA asked the Commission to consider narrow and carefully crafted amendments to the FERPA statute and regulations that give school officials the discretion, not the command, to share relevant information when needed to keep schools safe, as we have outlined today. Such discretion could lead to greater coordination of services for students before a tragedy occurs. Many of these services already exist. What is needed is a federal system that supports limited information sharing without unfunded mandates and provides much needed funding and technical assistance to encourage coordination of services. NSBA also urges federal policymakers to confer with school boards as the local policymakers to ensure that final guidance, rule, or statute can be implemented and is supported by federal funding. We urge the Commission and the Department of Education to consult meaningfully with school boards and their representatives, including state school boards associations, to address implementation specifics. NSBA appreciates the Commission's attention to this integral component of the school safety effort. We look forward to assisting the Commission in its future work.
Great. Ms. Traynor, thank you for laying out some of the complexities of FERPA as well as some thoughtful recommendations for sensible reforms to it. Our final FERPA speaker of the day is John Verdi, Vice President of Policy at the Future of Privacy Forum in Washington, D.C. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to testify, for convening today's meeting, and for your work to help make schools and students safer. This is a vital mission. The Future of Privacy Forum is a nonprofit organization that serves as a catalyst for privacy leadership and scholarship, advancing principled data practices in support of emerging technologies. We are optimists about data. We believe that the power of information technology is a net benefit to society and that it can be well managed to control risk to individuals. Data-driven efforts have the potential to improve educational outcomes, and privacy requirements should enhance rather than undermine student safety. Today, my testimony focuses on defining privacy risks, discussing how the use of children's data can present unique or heightened risks, identifying existing legal authorities that permit appropriate data sharing in response to health and safety risks while maintaining meaningful privacy safeguards, and recommending that the Commission explore opportunities to better educate stakeholders and engage in additional fact-finding concerning the risks at issue in this important discussion. Schools have long used students' personal information to improve learning outcomes and protect the health.
Fox 29 News Now, as we get you caught up on everything that's taking place in our region as well as across the country. We were just looking in on a current hearing convened by Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos on ways to try to keep children safe, a commission that she put together earlier this year. Back close to home, there is a funeral taking place right now in recognition and remembrance of a longtime firefighter who lost his life during a training exercise. There was a procession this morning. The funeral is actually taking place right now. Let's take a look at the Deliverance Evangelistic Church, where it is taking place right now. You can see that there are police officers who are all there gathered. 20th and Lehigh is where the church is. That, of course, is Sedgley Avenue. And they have the streets closed to remember Lieutenant Benny Hutchins. He was with the fire department for more than 30 years and is recognized by so many. And today, he is being, excuse me, laid to rest. It started this morning very early, about 7:15, as fire engines went on a procession north on 26th Street, Lehigh Avenue, and they arrived at the church so everyone could pay their respects. There were hundreds coming in and out this morning for the viewing, and the actual funeral began a little over about 40 minutes ago at Deliverance Evangelistic Church. Immediately following the service, the motorcade will depart the church and lay him to rest at Washington Crossing National Cemetery. You may remember again that the officer lost his life during a training exercise, and they continue to investigate what may have led to him actually passing away. But today is about a celebration of his life. You can see people who have been coming in and out. I'm not exactly sure of the timing right now of where it will end. There normally is a fairly long ceremony with so many dignitaries who come together and want to recognize the life of someone who has served for that long. He served for 34 years in the fire department. So you can see all of the fire trucks there, and we will continue to keep you updated. The remembrance, the recognition has poured in from all over the country for a man who is remembered as having served well, who is remembered as always having been someone who was supportive of his fellow firefighters and officers, and ultimately lost his life while training. So as there is more information, we will continue to keep you updated. This again, a live look at Deliverance Evangelistic Church, where the service is currently taking place. We'll take a look for just a minute. And of course, we were moving and coming back here. Excuse me for some of the sound issues. Our camera is moving right now to get you a better shot. And so we wanted to let you know what is taking place. This is Fox 29 News Now. This is an update that we will be giving you every day at 10 o'clock, keeping you informed about the things that are taking place here from the Fox Technical Operations Center. Moving around the area, we've updated you on several different things this morning, and we will continue to do so throughout the morning. It looks as if our camera is trying to get a better shot for you, perhaps inside at Deliverance Evangelistic Church. So if we can get that shot, we will continue to show you what we can show you. So there have been updates from Washington, D.C., the things that are taking place with the safety hearings, trying to make young people a little bit safer. We also have a situation where we can update NATO, and it appears right now that there are some meetings taking place in Washington, D.C., as they are coming together where they're discussing Supreme Court nomination. Let's take a quick look in on Washington, D.C. As they discuss the Supreme Court nomination.
school safety.
Okay, my apologies, folks, as we are experiencing some technical difficulties in getting you the sound. That was Chuck Schumer and a group of individuals who have come together in Washington, D.C., discussing the Supreme Court nomination and the strategies that they will put in place moving forward. As I said a little bit earlier, there have been some fireworks as it relates to NATO, the United States' role, whether or not others should be more deeply involved. President Trump has been outspoken about that, and Doug Luzader in Washington is going to update us.
No other president brought it up like I bring it up.
In what would usually be a sedate photo op, a breakfast meeting between the U.S. delegation and the head of NATO in Brussels, President Trump did not mince words, singling out U.S. allies, incensed that many aren't spending what they should on defense, while paying Russia for its vast supplies of natural gas, and he was naming names.
So we're protecting Germany, we're protecting France, we're protecting all of these countries, and then numerous of the countries go out and make a pipeline deal with Russia where they're paying billions of dollars into the coffers of Russia.
But Trump is not alone with the tough talk. Yesterday, the head of the European Council fired his own warning shots.
Dear America, appreciate your allies. After all, you don't have that many.
And despite the handshakes, this new approach to U.S. allies is making waves. And it comes ahead of a number of other stops on this trip as the president makes his way from Brussels to London to Scotland and then on to Finland for a one-on-one with Vladimir Putin, something Democrats are already critical of.
I am very much afraid what he would give away without any advisors to keep him in check.
The president seemed to brush it off.
Frankly, Putin may be the easiest of them all. Who would think? Who would think?
And thank you so much for that update on the fireworks taking place in NATO. Let's get back over to Deliverance Evangelistic Church, where our photographer has moved inside as we celebrate the life of a firefighter who lost his life while on duty. And we continue to keep you updated here on Fox 29 News Now, things that are taking place throughout our area and really throughout the country. We were just looking in on the homegoing service of Lieutenant Benny Hutchins, who lost his life earlier this month while during a training exercise. He is being celebrated by dignitaries and several others. We're going to take another look on that very shortly, but right now we are trying to get an update on the situation we showed you earlier with the Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and the discussion that is taking place about the strategy that Democrats are going to implement as President Trump has announced his nominee for the Supreme Court, what ultimately that means in terms of strategy, whether or not they will directly try to block, negotiate, or what have you. And let's take a look in on that again. So thank you, folks, for checking in with us on News Now. We will be here every day starting at 10 o'clock to get you updated on everything that's taking place throughout our area, throughout the country. We will be interactive. We will continue to keep you informed. And you can always follow us on the Fox 29 YouTube page, on the Fox 29 Facebook page, and ultimately at fox29.com. Thanks so much for spending some time with us. We'll see you again soon.